In the summer of 1992, a little girl called Rebecca is woken up by a noise coming from the swimming pool at her house. She goes to look out of the window and sees that the sound is coming from a toy boat floating on the water. She then runs to her brother Tommy's room and tells him she's found the little boat he lost in the pool. However, the young boy is ill and won't listen to his sister, which leads the girl to fetch the toy herself. Arriving at the pool, Rebecca uses a sieve to catch the little boat, which has sunk into the water. She is about to reach it, but she feels a mysterious force pulling her to the bottom of the pool. Despite this, she soon pulls herself together and sees that her mother is calling her to get out of the pool. The girl manages to swim to the surface, but her mother is no longer around. Confused, she tries to reach the edge of the pool, but when she sees her brother's toy boat, Rebecca decides to go back and get it. Unfortunately, she is once again pulled by a strange entity and disappears into the pool without a trace. Nowadays, the Waller family, made up of Ray and Eve and their children, Izzy and Elliot, are looking for a new home. In the past, Ray was a professional baseball player, but a serious injury kept him off the field and now he's looking for a quiet place to live with his wife and children. The couple then talk to the realtor, who shows them a beautiful home in an upscale neighborhood, but the rent isn't very affordable. The family continues their search until they find a huge house for sale. The realtor says that the property has been abandoned for some time, however, it is in good condition and has a huge swimming pool in the back. The family decides to take a look around, but Ray is more interested in the pool, which is covered by a tarpaulin. While watching more closely, he notices an old baseball and decides to pick it up, but ends up slipping and falling on the tarpaulin. Because of his bone problem, Ray can't swim properly and the tarpaulin seems to trap him underwater. Fortunately, after much effort, he manages to climb over the edge of the pool and his family rushes to help him. Eventually, they give up on the idea of buying the house and, the next day, Eve takes her husband to yet another doctor's appointment. Unfortunately, the diagnosis is disheartening, as Ray's condition has progressed from an injury to multiple sclerosis. In other words, the former player will have to stay away from baseball indefinitely, and will only be allowed to practice lighter sports, such as swimming. Because of this, after the consultation, Ray suggests buying the house with the pool, as it could be of great help in their recovery process. Eve agrees and, a few days later, the family begins to move into their new home. After tidying up the house, the four of them get together to renovate and clean the pool. Ray is tasked with removing all the dirt from the drain, but when he sticks his arm down to get it out, he ends up with a deep cut on his hand. Fortunately, Ray manages to get his arm out of the drain, but soon after, dark water starts leaking out, leaving everyone scared. Hours later, the couple call a group of pool maintenance technicians and the team leader tells them they're in luck. According to the technician, the pool is natural and self-sustaining, collecting water from an underground source, which is something unusual these days. Finally, he and his team clean the entire pool and, once it's ready and full of water, the family gets together to swim and enjoy a moment of relaxation. Ray soon begins to feel the benefits of the pool and feels that his body becomes lighter and more flexible in the water. Still, he can't forget his old baseball career and, when evening comes, Ray goes to check out some of his trophies and photos in the garage. While he does this, Eve looks at the household expenses, but soon decides to go back to the pool and relax for the rest of the evening. While bathing, she sees Elliot's cat watching her from afar, but he seems to be frightened by something. Even so, she continues swimming calmly, until she thinks she sees Ray, standing by the pool with his walking stick. Eve is startled, but when she looks again, no one is around. The night gets even stranger when the lights start to go out mysteriously and Eve thinks it best to go back into the house. When she gets to the bedroom, she asks if her husband was in the pool, but he says he fell asleep in bed some time ago. Eve then decides to drop the subject and goes to sleep, but her cat is still scared around the pool. The animal lies down on the trampoline and sees a toy boat floating in the water, very similar to the one Rebecca had seen years ago. It is then revealed that this is the same house where the girl lived a few years ago, until she mysteriously disappeared. Unfortunately, the next morning, it seems that the cat also suffered the same fate, as the family find only its collar floating in the water. Press F for the kitten. Ray picks it up and goes to investigate inside the house, but he notices that, after touching the water in the pool, the wound on his hand has completely disappeared. Even though he's surprised, Ray notices Elliot's sadness at having lost his pet and decides to install a tarpaulin over the pool, just to be safe. Yet, in the middle of the night, he decides to swim in the pool again, apparently feeling much better than before. This improvement soon proves to be true, because when he returns for another routine examination, the doctor informs him that Ray is recovering in an unusual way. This news makes Ray and his wife very happy, because maybe one day he will resume his career in sport. Later, The family gathers at home and Elliot invites his father to swim with him. Ray accepts and proposes that the two of them play at finding coins in the pool, but first he needs to finish some weightlifting. Elliot goes ahead with one of his toys, but as soon as he sinks into the water, a coin is thrown into the pool. The young man thinks it was his father, but no one is around. Even so, he goes to pick up the coin, only for others to be thrown in front of him, as if to guide him to the deepest part of the pool. One of them ends up falling into the drain and, as soon as Elliot picks it up, he hears a girl's voice. He swims up to find out who called him, but again, he finds himself completely alone in the pool. Elliot believes it's just another bad joke by Izzy, but the girl's voice calls out to him again and it seems to be coming from one of the openings in the pool. This voice belongs to Rebecca, the missing girl, and she asks for the young man's help to find her mother. In return, she will give him back his toy, which has ended up inside the opening of the pool. Elliot reaches out and tries to take the doll, but as soon as he pulls it out, a destroyed hand grabs it. The young man is terrified, but manages to free himself and runs to tell his mother what happened. However, when she checks the pool, she finds nothing but her son's toy floating in the water. Later, Eve goes to talk to her husband about what happened, but he believes it was just a figment of Elliot's imagination. In addition, Ray says that his son needs to make new friends and decides to organize a pool party and invite his schoolmates. Eve agrees with the idea, but even so, she suspects that what happened to Elliot was not something ordinary. The next morning, Ray is invited to his son's school to teach the baseball team some tips on how to become a professional player. Along with Ray, Eve and Izzy decide to watch Elliot play. Training begins and, when it's Elliot's turn, he manages to hit the ball on his first attempt, making Eve and Ray very proud. Afterwards, one of the coaches invites Ray to show off his batting skills and, despite his health condition, he accepts. In the first two throws, Ray can't hit the ball and falls to the ground because his bones are so weak. Even so, he doesn't give up and, on the third throw, Ray feels as if he's regaining his strength, just as he did when he was in the pool. Then, just as he did in his glory days in the stadiums, Ray hits the ball with his bat and hits a home run, which leaves everyone impressed. The whole team rushes to congratulate the former player, but Elliot, Eve and Izzy look on in confusion at what has just happened. At the end of the day, Eve and Ray decide to go for a romantic dinner and leave Izzy to look after her brother. As soon as they leave, the girl invites a friend from the swimming group to her house and the two of them have fun in the pool, playing Marco Polo. When it's Izzy's turn, her friend decides to play a joke and gets out of the pool, while she tries to find him with her eyes closed. Just then, the pool lights start to go out and behind Izzy, a monstrous entity is watching her from behind. She believes it to be her friend and decides to swim to the bottom of the pool to make sure. However, instead of him, she meets the creature, which grabs her foot and starts pulling her down to the bottom. Luckily, Izzy manages to break free from the entity and swims back to the surface, where she meets her friend. She runs scared to the edge of the pool, saying that someone has grabbed her foot, but he says he didn't see anyone but her in the water. The conversation continues, but the girl's parents return from dinner and her friend is forced to leave before they find him. Despite what he said before leaving, Izzy is sure she saw something monstrous in the pool. The next morning, Elliot goes to his sister's room and says he noticed that she was scared after getting out of the pool. He knows that the girl also saw something sinister, but Izzy prefers to keep it a secret so as not to worry her parents. She makes Elliot promise that he won't talk about it anymore and, later, the family organizes a pool party. While the guests are enjoying themselves, Elliot decides to put a hidden camera in the bedroom window to capture any suspicious events. At this point, Ray looks for his son to swim in the pool, but ends up bumping into Ty, one of the team's players. He asks for the former player's autograph on the ball he hit in practice and, when he looks at it closely, Ray is surprised to see that the force of his shot has caused part of the leather of the ball to tear. However, he soon puts this aside and sees two boys in a contest of strength in the pool, while being carried on their shoulders by their parents. Ray then invites Ty to join in and carries him on his shoulders to start the contest. At the same time, Eve finishes preparing the food and talks to the realtor about the house. She says that Elliot got scared the other day when he was in the pool and that she herself noticed some strange things, like the lights suddenly going out. The realtor tries to deflect the subject, but Eve notices that she is hiding something and insists on the truth. The woman then admits that, in the past, a family lived in the same house and that a little girl called Rebecca disappeared into the pool. Since then, the house has been abandoned and no one has wanted to buy it because they think it's haunted. Despite this, the realtor says that it's all just superstition and that she didn't want to spoil the family's experience in their new home. However, they soon discover that this is no legend, because during the contest of strength in the pool, the entity manifests itself again. It takes the form of a black mist, which comes out of the drain and goes straight into Ray's body, completely overpowering him. He then starts walking backwards towards the bottom of the pool, causing Ty to be covered by the water and start drowning. The young man tries to get free, but Ray holds him tightly and no one around realizes what's happening. Fortunately, Elliot sees everything through the camera and runs to his mother to warn her. However, before she can do anything, Ty's parents notice that their son is in danger and rush to rescue him. The young man is saved by his father, who is startled to see the young man's injured legs. In addition, Ray seems to have drowned in the pool and his family rushes to help him. After this bizarre event, the police investigate, but thanks to Eve's pleas, Ty's parents decide not to press charges. Nevertheless, they order Ray to stay away from their son and not to go near the team's training ground. Faced with this event that almost ended in tragedy, Eve has no doubt that the pool is haunted. So, without a second thought, she packs her things and calls her family to leave the house as soon as possible. Ray, however, refuses, saying that living there was the best thing that ever happened to him and that the pool is restoring his health. However, Eve is determined to leave and convinces him to get in the car. However, as soon as the vehicle moves, Ray starts to feel sick, as if he were drowning from the inside out. As a result, his family is forced to take him back home and Eve despairs when she sees that her husband seems to be possessed by what inhabits the pool. To save him, she decides to investigate the origins of the house further and discovers that there have been more cases of missing persons at the pool. She then goes to the home of Mrs. Summers, the last resident of the house and Rebecca's mother, to gather more information. When she gets there, Eve talks about what's been happening at the pool and asks what happened to Rebecca. At first, the woman refuses to talk about it, but changes her mind and tells her about the legend of a wishing fountain, known as Demigami. According to the story, the fountain is capable of fulfilling a person's greatest wishes. However, a life must be given in exchange for them to come true. Whether by fate or chance, the swimming pool at Eve's house draws water from this fountain, and so the entity that fulfills these wishes inhabits the place. Finally, Mrs. Summers reveals that, on the fateful night of Rebecca's disappearance, she was possessed by this evil entity. Internally, she wanted her sick child to be cured, but the price to be paid was the life of her other daughter. After hearing the whole story, Eve is horrified to realize that Mrs. Summers has sacrificed one child in exchange for the other. Even so, she asks the woman to tell her how to prevent the same thing from happening to Ray and his children. However, before she can say anything, the woman starts to feel sick, as if she were drowning, just like Ray. Eve tries to help her, but Mrs. Summers also seems to be possessed by the entity and her eyes, nose and mouth start leaking dark water. The woman goes on to say that the Fountain of Wishes will soon exact the price of its sacrifice and that the cycle will continue to repeat itself forever. Frightened, Eve flees the scene and heads home, fearing the worst. She tries to reach Ray on the phone, but he is in the shower, once again being dominated by the demonic creature from the pool. Minutes later, Izzy and Elliot return from school and call for their parents, but neither of them answers their call. Izzy decides to look for them in the garage and Elliot fills a glass with water, but before he can drink, he hears the sound of his missing cat. The young man goes after him in the pool and leaves his glass on the counter, which is pushed by an invisible force until it falls to the ground. Elliot continues to approach the pool and sees the shadow of his cat on a float in the water. He climbs onto the trampoline to try and reach him and, without realizing it, the pool lights start flashing and the canvas crank moves on its own. Finally, the young man reaches the float, but instead of finding his cat, he sees the macabre entity, which pulls him into the water. Inside the house, Izzy hears her brother's screams and runs towards him, but the tarpaulin covers the entire pool and she can't turn the crank. Shortly afterwards, her mother appears to help her and, seeing that the two of them don't have enough strength to remove the tarpaulin, Eve jumps into the water in search of her son. At that moment, Izzy runs into the kitchen to ask for help, but ends up slipping on the broken glass and injuring her hand with the piece of glass. Meanwhile, Eve continues to look for Elliot, but there is no sign of him, just a dark spot around the drain, as if it were a passage. Eve then returns to the surface, ties her body to a hose and swims towards the portal. Little does she know that her daughter is also in danger, for in front of the girl, Ray appears, possessed by the demonic entity. He knocks his daughter to the ground and tells her that Elliot has been chosen to be the sacrifice in the pool. Izzy doesn't accept this and hides in the garage, with her father coming after her. Back at the pool, Eve manages to get through the portal and finds Elliot, unconscious in the water. She soon rescues him, but as soon as she swims back to the surface, several of the souls trapped in the water try to stop her. Eve manages to escape them, but ends up getting lost in the darkness and can't find her way back. Then Rebecca's spirit appears before her and shows her the way back to the real world. Thanks to the girl's help, Eve manages to return safely, but Elliot isn't breathing. She tries to give him a heart massage to revive him, but Ray comes up from behind and attacks her, saying that she can't stop the sacrifice. This seems to be the tragic end of the Waller family, but Izzy appears, holding her father's baseball bat, and hits him with several blows. Ray is knocked to the ground, and for a brief moment, he breaks free of the entity's grasp and regains consciousness. The family then decide to flee the house, but as they move away from the pool, Elliot begins to be attacked by the power of the evil presence in the water. Seeing that his son will perish if a sacrifice isn't made, Ray apologizes to everyone and walks towards the water. Izzy tries to stop him, but her father decides to offer his life to spare his loved ones. Then, as a last act of heroism, Ray swims towards the shadows covering the water and is sucked into them. His family has finally been saved from a tragic fate, although the price was too high. At dawn, Eve, Elliot and Izzy gather in front of the swimming pool, and their mother suggests that they sell the house and restart their lives elsewhere. However, her children say that the best way to honor their father's sacrifice is to prevent other people from falling victim to the entity. Eve agrees to the idea and finally empties the water from the pool and sends an excavator to cover it completely, leaving the curse of the wishing fountain dormant forever. So what did you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, like and subscribe for more movie recaps. See you next time.